the investigator could use hearsay in his investigation, and so this is once again going to the fact that this is the information that the agency had when they made their decision. This is what he found out this is what investigator Blake found out, or Blake Ward found out in his investigation, and this is the information the agency used in their decision.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
You testified that you worked as a nurse for my client's great aunt Barbara Stone, isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
And you gave her health care between the hours of noon and 2 p.m.?
Yes, I did.
Now, you testified that Ms. Stone gave you gifts including money, isn't that true?
Voluntarily, yes.
Isn't it true that there's no one here today that has testified that they were actually gifts and that they were voluntary?
I would say so.
As in, there's no one here to testify that that is true?
Besides me, no.
You work for Tender Home Care Agency, or THA, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true in the code of ethics of your employer that it discourages the practice of taking gifts?
Discourages, yes.
But you have expressed the attitude of, heck with caution, you want what's coming to you. Haven't you expressed that opinion before?
While it discourages it, it does not prohibit it. So
I don't think you heard my question. I said, isn't it true that you have expressed the attitude of, heck with caution, you want what's coming to you? Haven't you expressed that attitude?
yes.
Now, at one point during the period of April 15th and May 16th, 2018, you were visited by investigator Blake Wards from DHPD, is that correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you told the investigator that Harley Davidson has a key to the apartment?
Yes.
And isn't it true you told Blake Wards that you had seen my client in Mrs. Stone's apartment?
Yes.
You testified that you worked there for 2 hours a day, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, if my math is correct, that means there were 22 hours a day that you were not there, isn't that true?
Mathematically saying yes.
Fair to say that you cannot testify as to whether or not my client was with his great aunt in the apartment for the other 22 hours a day that you were not present.
Can you please repeat the question?
Fair to say that you cannot testify as to whether or not my client was in the apartment with his great aunt for the other 22 hours a day where you were not present.
Yes.
So yes, it's fair to say that you can't testify for the other 22 hours a day you're not in the apartment?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Call your next witness, please.
The respondent calls Tatum Neal to the stand.
Please state your name.
My name is Tatum Neal.
Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your address.
2 Dickinson Avenue in Gotham City, Nevada.
Please be seated.
Please further identify yourself to the court.
As I said before, my name is Tatum Neal, and I am a probation officer in Gotham City, Nevada.
And how are you familiar with the petitioner in this case, Harley Davidson?
I was the petitioner's probation officer from 2016 to 2018.
Could you tell us what you do as a probation officer?
As a probation officer, I make sure probationers are staying on the right side of the law. They have meetings with me every month where they give me an update on what they've been doing. I also keep informed of their address and contact information.
And what address did the petitioner give you?
11-254 Civics Avenue, apartment 1010 in Gotham City, Nevada.
How do you know this is actually his address?
I sent the...
Your Honor, speculation. Your Honor may be heard.
Yes.
This is a part of Tatum Neal's job to know exactly where his probationaries are, including where they live, as he previously stated.
I'm going to overrule the objection.
Would you like me to ask the question?
Yes.
How do you know this is actually his address?
I sent the petitioner letters, and none of them were ever returned to me as undeliverable.
Do you have any other evidence that the petitioner lives there?
the petitioner gave me that address, on our first meeting, he gave me that address as his residence.
With whom from the Department of Housing Preservation and Development did you share this information?
Investigator Blake Woods.
No further questions at this time.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Neal, you've testified that you are a probation officer, correct?
Yes.
And you've been a probation officer for Gotham City for many years, isn't that true?
Yes.
And during that time, you worked closely with the DHPD investigator Blake Wards, correct?
Yes.
You and Blake Wards called each other Batman and Robin. That's how closely you two worked, correct?
Yes.
During the time period between April 15th and May 16th, 2018, Investigator Wards interviewed you about my client. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Isn't it true, to your knowledge, that Investigator Wards never independently verified the information that you have provided?
I'm not sure if I can say I don't know.
Isn't it true that you have never communicated with my client about the interview with Investigator Wards?
Yes.
So it's true, isn't it, that my client never had an opportunity to refute any of the information that you reported to Investigator Wards, correct?
Yes.
You testified that you were supposed to keep track of the probationers you supervise. That's correct?
Yes.
So this means that you had to know where they lived. Isn't that true?
Yep.
So you've never actually visited my client at his residence, correct?
No, I haven't visited him.
So isn't it true that you have no firsthand knowledge of where my client actually lived?
No, that's not true.
Isn't it true that you have not testified that you told Investigator Wards that you have never visited my client's residence? Isn't that true?
Could you repeat the question?
Isn't it true that you have not testified that you told Investigator Wards that you never visited my client's residence?
Can you restate the question without using negatives?
All right. Isn't it true that you never told Investigator Wards, isn't it true that you told Investigator Wards that you've never visited my client's residence?
Yes.
So isn't it true, and isn't it true that you have not testified to saying that?
I haven't testified to saying that. Could you repeat that? Sorry.
From the,
Yeah, just repeat the question.
okay, I'll start. So isn't it true that you've never testified before in an affidavit that you said?
Yes.
Do you understand? Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes. Stay seated, please.
You stated previously that you never visited the petitioner Harley Davidson at his residence. Why is that?
I never felt the need to visit the petitioner at his residence. He showed up on time, he paid his $25 fee, and he was a pretty low-level criminal, so I never had the time or the need to check
Objection,
with.
No, overruled.
Do I have to say that again? Or?
You can restate your answer.
I never felt a need to visit the petitioner at his residence because he showed up on time to our meetings, he paid his fee to me, which was $25, and he was also a low-level criminal, so I never visited his residence.
And what, if any, evidence did you have that the petitioner did in fact live there?
As I said before, I sent him letters which were never returned to me, and he also gave me that address at our first meeting.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Next witness?
Respondents call Blake Wards to the stand.
You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please state your name and address.
My name is Blake Wards. I live on 239 Lulu Avenue.
Please be seated.
it.